Ready? So for today we are going to be learning how to sketch quadratic functions. And I know we did it earlier, but we had it mostly in vertex form. I want to discuss what happens if it's in standard form. So I really wrote down some steps. I broke it down for if you want to copy down these notes. And I'll show you how you use these steps to really figure out how to sketch the graph here. So let's look at this first example down here. It says here, determine whether the parabola is open upwards or downwards. That's the first step. And that's based on your A value. Since my A here, now really that's maybe one of the first things you want to focus on. My A value in the front here is technically a 1. I have a -2 and a -3 as my B and C values. So maybe you can write that down for yourself. So A equals 1, B equals -2, and C equals -3. So that kind of helps you out here because it says if A is greater than 1, then it opens upward. So that's the first thing. The first thing here is that this opens upward because A is greater than 0. Okay, so that's first thing. Okay, the next thing it says that we're going to look at, is we're going to graph the axis of symmetry. So the axis of symmetry is equivalent to x equals -b/2a. So that's a -2 over 2 times 1, which is technically -2. So this is -2 divided by 2 is -1, but negative of that is +1. So x equals 1 is my axis of symmetry. Now, if you remember, the axis of symmetry is the line of symmetry. So here is the line of symmetry. Step 3 says find the vertex. So we already know that the x value of the vertex is 1, but now we need to find out what the y value is. To find that, you can plug it back into the equation. So y equals 1 squared minus 2 times 1 minus 3, which equals, well, this is 1 minus 2. So 1 minus 2 is -1, minus 3 is -4. So 1, -4 is my turning point. So I'll go to 1, -4. There's my turning point or my vertex. Then for step number 4, we want to determine any x-intercepts. So to determine x-intercepts, we want to set this equal to 0. If you guys remember, we actually learned how to factor such quadratic equations. So if you remember how to factor, this is add, multiply. So two numbers that add to give us -2, but multiply to give us a -3. And that should be -3 and +1. So x equals 3 and x equals -1. So here's a 3 and here's a -1. Those are my x-intercepts. Then my y-intercept is my c, which in this case it equals -3. So that's right here. And then step 6 is to sketch it by connecting those points. So really looks something like this. That's open upwards. So notice it's open upwards. My axis of symmetry is at +1. My turning point is at 1, -4. My x-intercepts are at 3 and -1. My y-intercept's at -3, and now I just sketched it. So really, those are the steps that you need to follow if you're trying to sketch this. Notice I did not use a calculator at any point. If I put this in the calculator, it probably would match this graph. So now I'm going to do it again for this second example. If you want to pause it, if you feel comfortable, you could try it out. So notice, since there's no c, my c equals 0. So make sure you note that. So negative, so this is going to be a negative b over 2a. So here, if you notice, my axis of symmetry is 1/2. So I kind of sketched it. I mean, it doesn't always have to be perfect. Remember, a sketch is just really what it should look like. So here I know my x coordinate is 1/2. So here when I want to plug this in, 1/2 squared is 1/4. 1/4 times -2 is -1/2. And then plus 1 would give me 1/2. So 1/2, 1/2 is my turning point. Now this one, if you remember, we factor a little bit different. Here I have a GCF, so I could actually factor out this -2x. I'd be left with x minus 1. So here I would get x equals 0 and x equals 1. Which just kind of makes sense. Notice how it's been pinched. Notice how my a term is a -2. Since it's a 2, it's going to be more narrow. So all of this so far makes sense. All the math, all the work. You could really think about it later. My y-intercept, since c equals 0, it's at 0. Oops. So we already know that because that's where an x-intercept is. And now we just sketch it by connecting the points. So there you have it. So here are 2 more examples I want you to try. And then I'll come back and see the answers of the sketch. Okay, so hopefully you were able to sketch the graphs. So here's the work that was completed in order to sketch them correctly. All the information is there for you. I know it got a little tricky here for 2 reasons. Number 1, you were dealing with fractions of the third. And then also when you had to factor, this was one of those problems where you could not factor this. So you had to multiply the a and the c terms and then end up factoring by grouping. If you remember, you have to split this piece right here. So really, it goes back to your rules of factoring. So basically, that's it. I really wanted to make sure you knew how to graph a quadratic equation if it was not in vertex form and if it was in standard form. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and have a great day, everybody.